Do this. Hello and welcome everyone to our Strixhaven draft archetype stream. During the next few hours, let's hope it's around 2 or 3 hours. We'll talk you through. We'll discuss the Strixhaven draft archetypes. We'll share our ideas regarding the big picture of the set with you, and hopefully that'll prepare you nicely for your first draft or sealed events. Either in paper, but most likely digital, I would say. I have two guests today. Exclamation mark guests will tell you a bit more about them. But maybe Pawel and Max, you can also introduce yourself a little before we actually dive in. Want to go first, Pawel?
Sure. So I'm Sierkovitz. I basically play limited and dabble in data analysis. I've been a frequent guest of the Skeleton stream of yours. That's the third time we're doing it, I guess.
Yeah, it's the third time. Third time we're doing it.
First time was not streamed. First time was just for the two of us.
Sure. And we did we see how we did the call time one, right? Recently.
Exactly. We revisited our predictions, so how terrible they were, and actually they were not as terrible. Which I think is probably not going to be the case with these ones. I really find this a hard format to crack, to be fair, much harder than the previous ones, which is weird.
I think so too.
Because Kaltheim was mentally complicated, and I had no problem visualizing decks, but here I do. So basically, I'm doing this bit. I'm playing Magic, doing some data analysis using 17 lands data, and I've been on a couple of content things. I wrote a couple of articles for Channel Fireball. I've been on limited resources, and that's me.
Your limited resource performance was great.
Limited has been used to describe me frequently. The word limited.
Good. Max?
Yep. I'm Max.
Hey, Jordan.
Sometimes you can see me go by the name Hululu. That's the name I used in World of Warcraft way back, in the years. So I think I came back to Magic about last year, like after they released Arena on Mac and start drafting, jamming all these drafts. So yep, I like a lot. And I also work with 17 Lands. I'm one of the developers there, and you may know me by like the replay features that So
yeah, great. Thanks, Max. Before we
Max basically created most of the stuff that we use on 17 Lands, so
Not really me, but yeah, I will take credit.
Take the credit when it's given. That's a good advice.
Definitely. Credit where credit's due, right? Right, Paul? So, well, as you can get from our introductions, we're basically three scrubs, just enjoying limited a lot. Most of what we're going to share with you tonight is based on, or today, like, is based on like stuff we also hear, right? We also follow a lot of content creators. We see what they post. We watch their videos, and we basically crunch that and get that towards our own opinions, basically. And those opinions we're sharing with you tonight. I think it's fair to give credit to the people who supplement our opinions, I would say. And here's a nice non-complete list, I think, of people that inspire us. So yeah, feel free to follow any of these podcasts and definitely.
We put Alex on it.
I think I did, right?
Damn it.
Yeah, we thought about that one, but in the end, he deserved his.
Okay then.
Want to dive into the big picture of Strixhaven, guys?
Sure.
Do you wanna kick us off, Max? Here.
Yeah, I can do that. So maybe one thing at the beginning is all of these are just like first impressions, kind of. We look at the cards, we look at some interactions, and thought, okay, maybe this is how it goes. But I think this is just like a first sort of things. So there are about maybe 2 or 3 big interesting things for this format. First of all, there's the mystical archives. So there's a lot of very, very powerful spells in the mystical archive, like I don't know, like Mrs. Mastery or whatever that we'll talk about in the later slides. But if you could pick up some of these and play in a deck that works well with them, it would be pretty good. And the other thing is now, if you have done some draft sims on one of the simulators online, you notice like you may sometimes get 2 or 3 rares in the same pack. So that means sometimes you could pick up a rare and that there's still a rare in the pack and there's still one more rare for the next person. And that could mean that you are more likely to pick up more rares and uncommons later in the pack. So that maybe you will get a good uncommon pack 6 or 7 instead of 4 or 5 like before.
Yeah, and I think we should take that as less as a signal than we would take that as a signal maybe in previous sets. Is that a bit what we're getting at here?
I think so. It's probably going to be more difficult to read signals too. Yeah. Now there's like more.
Yeah, I think we should also keep in mind that some of those rarities are a bit fake because lots of the Mystic Archive cards are just given rarity based on whether they are legal in standard currently or not. So some of the, like Lightning Bolt is a rare. Obviously, this card was printed as a common.
Right,
and obviously it's a good idea not to reprint it as a common, but I mean, it's not really a rare. It's just rare for the sake of us burning some gems on Arena.
Yeah, fair enough. But it is a rare in power level still, right? And maybe your example was a bit awkward here, but Lightning Bolt I would still pick over most uncommons, I would say.
Possibly.
Okay.
I'm just gonna turn on the light because it might be dark soon.
Sure.
Yep. So I can keep going. So the other new thing is the lessons. So lessons is going to take. There's going to be one common slot that's going to be a lesson card instead of a common. And the interesting thing is that lesson in the common slot could be a common or rare or a mythic, but not an uncommon. The uncommon lessons are still going to be showing up in the regular uncommon slot. So that part is a little bit weird. So lessons and learns lessons are a little bit like Snowlands in Kaldheim, right? There's only going to be I think maybe 1 in a pack, or maybe you can have 2. I'm not sure, but it's still going to be a limited thing.
There's going to be, I think, around 28.5 per pod on average.
I see.
Right, so that's
because
like
the uncommon ones, when they are in the pack, there's still the lesson slot, so there's going to be 24 from the lesson slot and 5 times 0.9 on average because the rest of them are 5 uncommons.
Right.
Yeah. I think that they did it only because that means that the number of lessons and learn spells is exactly identical.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
It a bit more than MDFC.
Yeah. So it's going to be like a fairly limited resources, and make sure you pick them highly, especially the ones that are like going to be good for the deck, also good in different situations, like the summoning style, and some of the colorless ones.
Yeah, and I think it's also good to mention that a lot of them, they look like they're not worth a card, but that's because you're not supposed to put them in your deck as being a card, right? You're supposed to get them from actually learning, which is an ability that is on cards. So therefore, even though they look quite weak as a card, I think they're still rather high picks, especially the summoning ones, right? The ones that make.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about them as a sort of flexible kicker.
Right. Yeah.
But you can play on another turn and it will trigger additional spell casting. But I mean, it's basically a toolbox where you play your learn card and you pick whatever is best in the current situation.
Yeah.
So it's not only good to draft them, but also to have some sort of diversity in what they are doing, so you're ready for different situations where some things might be situationally better.
Yeah, definitely. And I honestly think that if you end up your draft with like 0 or maybe 1 lesson card, you're actually in trouble there, I would say. I think it's good to pick up at least 1 or 2, I would say, because otherwise learn cards are basically unplayable for
you. Yeah, I mean they're not on rate. I assume that there might be some decks that just don't want lessons and they don't want
learn cards.
Learn spells, and some kind of weird aggro decks, but I still didn't figure out how they might look like by no means. I think that so far from the ones that I tried to build, all of them had some lessons, and it's like a mini companion really, because you sort of start with 8 cards in your hand, and you have some kind of agency over what you pick, so you actually can use them situationally. If you're mana flooded, you don't want to maybe put another land on your board, but maybe you want to draw a card and scry. So there's some flexibility there.
Yeah. Okay. Regarding removal, Max?
Yep. So there's let me see. Yeah, maybe we should go over it like in the later, but it just like quickly overview. There is one aura in the set, and that is Detention Vortex, and it doesn't look very good. It's probably nearly unplayable. Yeah, so which kind of makes sense, right? Because there's a lot of like sacrifice synergy in the set. There's a lot of cards with like trigger abilities. The aura-based removals are not going to do much at all, so maybe that's why they didn't put anything in the set. There's also no removal on a creature, like a creature that ETB deals damage or anything like that. And then there's just like the regular removal you would expect, like red removal deals some damage, white exile something, black just kill a creature, and so on. So bounce spells may be good in this set because there's a lot of tokens running around in all the colors. So there are 2 main bounce spells. I think one is Spur in Books, which is the one that gets cheaper if you bounce an attacking creature. And there's the Ether Helix and the green-blue card.
Yeah.
So there's one so there's one learn card that divide by 0 that can bounce stuff also, but it says mana value 1 or greater, I think. So you cannot use it to bounce tokens.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the tapper from War of Sparks. They made it in such a way that it couldn't tap the army token, and it's the same with this bounce spell. That basically they made it so that it cannot bounce the mascots or any other creature tokens.
Yeah, and I think it's good to add because you already mentioned that there are hardly any auras, and I think it also has to do like a lot of auras are replaced by instant sorceries putting +1/+1 counters on. I think that also has to do with the fact that they trigger Magecraft, right? So where an aura card would not trigger Magecraft, if make that a sorcery that puts counters on a creature, then suddenly you're triggering Magecraft and you're fitting with that, I would say. Another thing that bounce spells are also good, I think, because you are putting a lot of counters on creatures, right? So even though you're maybe not bouncing a token and that way killing it, I can imagine that bouncing a creature that has like 3 or 4 +1/+1 counters on it is very valuable. So I kind of
when you invest, but when you invest your energy into making a 5/5 star pupil, that's the thing that when it dies, it puts counters on something else. If that one gets put on top of your library, you feel really robbed, I guess, from the investment that you did. So yeah, that's worth.
I think against that card specifically, you rather bounce in than that you kill it, right? Which is a strange thing.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think that's actually true. Okay. Sierkovitz, want to take this one?
Oh, how to build a skeleton.
Oh, right. You're a bit delayed.
I have a delay. I'm like, okay, I'm taking this one, whatever this one is. But okay, so when I was building my skeletons, I don't know if you all use the same criteria, but I tried to put between 0 and 1 rare, so obviously usually 1. Couple of mystic archive spells, also with no duplicates, and there I actually was generous with myself and I allowed rare ones as well. 6 uncommons, that's the important rule, because I think that the decks in Modern Limited are built around the uncommons most of the time, so not putting uncommons is really not making decks as they are supposed to be. And I was quite generous with myself in terms of number of lessons I put, but because these are skeletons, they're just, I put the lessons more to show what I think a particular archetype should do. I think some archetypes are just going to focus on putting the creature lessons, so the mascots of each school. And some of them will go for the variety, and they will want to have sort of toolbox sideboard when they can have 4 or 5 different things. And they want to sacrifice high picks to get those because they want to have this broad kind of sideboard option. And then the decks were filled up with commons, and I allowed 6 duplicates. But as you can possibly see, I was pretty relaxed about the rules there as well. I mean, as long as it's not something egregious.
Yeah, and,
Not
and,
that
it,
Jordan.
and it's not
Yeah.
we're not allowing 6 copies of the same card, right? We're saying like we allow 2 copies of the same card 6 times.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, obviously,
Which is still a bit luxurious, but at least we're not allowing you to put 6 like 1-2 first strike flyers in your deck. Like that would be.
which I did last time we did the skeletons, because I did that deck with four raptors, because I thought that raptor would be super important for that archetype, and I was right in that particular case. But yeah, I mean, I think that lots of your best decks will be the decks where you have multiple copies of a particular common, and this is an important thing to keep in mind. We only allow duplicates, 2 duplicates of each common per deck. But I'm pretty sure that my best deck in the format are going to have 4 or 5 copies of something that is pretty busted,
Right.
or that fits my plan quite well, and that's what I want to build. Here it's more to maybe signal to the viewers what we think is the most important common in the particular archetype, rather than saying, oh, I want 2 of those. No, probably I want 4 of those. If I want the 5/4 in my deck that costs 2 mana when you sacrifice a creature, I probably want 4 of them or 5 of them, and I want to play them turn 2 and turn 3, and that's the deck's plan. But of course, just to show you the skeletons, it's maybe better to focus on a broader variety of cards and deal with a bit more realistic scenarios.
Yeah, fully agree. And I think good point you made there. If we're using 2 of the same card, probably saying it's an important archetype. Yeah.
Or just a very good card on rate. That's in many cases. Also, I was pretty relaxed about putting on basics. I just put 2 of them in each deck. You won't get 2 of them in each of the decks that you draft, that's for sure. But you want them. I mean, I think that they're higher picks than initially we will be doing them.
Yeah, I got them around like B-, C+, the common dual lands. I think it's very important. Picture mana and also the scry is really, really.
I do agree, Sir Jordan. The Raptor deck was perfect. Even if it didn't win, but it mainly won.
Want to dive into Lorehold, guys?
Not really.
Not really. Let me see.
I mean, let's do it, but
yeah. So
I still don't understand how it should work, Lorehold.
So if you viewers want to watch along, the slide deck, there are a lot of links in the slide deck. Slide deck is actually available, so ! slide deck will give you the link to the slides that we're using. So if you want to follow along or watch the skeletons that we're discussing in a bit more detail, then feel free to tag along. So I think all 3 of us built skeletons for most of the archetypes, or well, if we were planning on building multiples that were very similar, we decided not to. So these are the archetypes skeletons that we built during our preparations. We won't go over every archetype listed here. We'll just highlight like 1 or 2 per college, but these are at least links to them. So if you want to have a look at them, then go ahead. So first up, I think as Pawel is saying, a tough one, Lorehold. But we have some big picture stuff before we dive into our skeleton. So want to take this one, Max?
Yep, I can do that. So as we said here, Lorehold is very, very different from what we traditionally see in the red-white archetype. It's not like a low curve or a lot of like creature aggro type like in Kaldheim or other like sets before. So there's a big spirit theme here, and there's a big graveyard theme. It looks like a lot of the power is coming from the uncommons. So the Quintorius, the uncommon legendary creature, it gives all creature +1, but no spirits +1/+0, and there's ability to make more spirits. And there's also the excavation that mills you every turn that fills your graveyard strategies. So maybe there's more than one way to build this archetype, and we'll have to see. And there seems to be like a small like a mana value 3 or less theme. Like if you have mana value 3 or less creatures in your graveyard or in your deck, then you can like cheat them out or re-animate them or somehow. But those are mostly in rare. So if you can do it, yeah, do it. But otherwise, it's not like a big focus. Maybe we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I did because you're probably a bit late, Max.
Oh yeah, I'm behind. Yeah, so one thing here is that a lot of the creatures in Lorehold don't have a lot of power and they don't have evasion. And also in this set, there's not a lot of equipment to pump them, unlike Karhan. So the question is, okay, now you make all these spirits, 3/2, 3/2s, you flood the board, but they have a lot of these pass token on the other side and whatnot. So what do you do here? How do you get through damage? Or what if they have a 0/4 war on the opposite side? So this is something like we'll try to keep in mind when we build the decks.
Yeah, good.
You just play Quintorius and your spirits are 4/2 all of a sudden. They can deal with the wall.
That's easy.
Indeed, right? Why don't you put 3 Quintoriuses in your deck, Max? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
I'm half joking, but it might be very well that you only want to draft Lorehold when you have those type of solutions, and otherwise it's just going to be a deck that always falls short from the.
Yeah, that's definitely my how I'm going into this set. If I see a Quintorius, I might draft Lorehold. That's how I'm approaching this one. What's this one, Max?
Yeah, so this is just like maybe a speculation how the creatures line up. So one problem of the 3/2s is that it's reasonably at blocking 3 toughness creatures, but if you have to block something with 4 toughness, now you're in trouble because you lose both your creature if you block a 4/4. So this card, like this 1/4 with no text, got my attention because I was wondering, okay, why is it there? And one reason maybe is to help you double block. And sometimes you can attack if you can pump the power or something, but it's mostly like to be used in double blocking. And now you have like 4 powers and 6 toughness, which is pretty hard to kill.
Yeah, and you're saying no text, but it is a spirit, eh? So I think the text is it has +1 attack most of the time. Like
That's interesting.
That's true.
I'm imagining that's how this works, and that means that this is a 2 mana 2/4 most of the time, which is actually quite a strong card. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I thought about the same card, but from a slightly different angle. I thought a bit about it as a sort of, this is your insurance policy on how to get to late game, and that red and white wants to be this attrition-y kind of deck that doesn't even bother attacking in the first 7 turns, and then when it does, it has probably like 6 spirit tokens, and they are all 4/2s, and then actually that attack matters a lot independently of their weak toughness. So I was looking at it from that perspective, as an early blocker rather than anything.
Yeah. That's true too. Yeah, so another card that's interesting is the Stonewire Spirit, the new Battlefield Raptor. So it's not like a really aggro card because there's no pick in this set, but there's a lot of interesting text on the card. So first of all, it's a spirit, and if you can pump it, it becomes a 2/2. That's a pretty good attacker for 2 mana. And it has a bunch of abilities to like trigger your exile from graveyard triggers. And the best thing about it is it doesn't compete with the other cards that do the same thing. So if you remember in Kaldheim, you do a bunch of like Master Skull, Mask Vandal stuff, and now your graveyard is empty, you can't use them anymore. The interesting thing of this card is it can exile any card, so it uses up the lands that no other cards care about. So maybe that's one of the upsides to it. And like we said, the spirits don't have a lot of evasion, and this can give you flying, which may be used for like late game. You just smack them 2 or 3 turns and you just kill them.
Yeah, so
is the spirit the only really thing that can exile lands from your graveyard? Is that the only thing from red that can get some kind of bonus on the common and uncommon level?
Yeah, it seems so.
Okay.
At least from my first search.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that's a very valuable. Want to dive into the archetype skeleton?
Sounds good.
I'm a bit in doubt whether I'm going to use the slide or whether I'm going to alt top to the actual archetype so that we can hover over the cards. I think that's more convenient if we do, right? So I can actually drag the cards on top that we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm fine with going to the top so we can look through.
Yeah, sure. Shall we start with the sideboard? So for the people watching, we added the sideboard to most of our skeletons, but the sideboard only contains the lessons, right? So we're just showing off the lessons. Of course, there will be more of a sideboard, but we're just showing off the lessons that we think are valuable. Anyone that really wants to take this one? Else,
isn't that yours?
I think it's mine. Yeah, I'll go over.
Yeah.
No worries.
I mean, just
No worries. So I selected three lessons here. I think the summonings are basically good in every college. I think it's very good to note that the summonings are hybrid mana, so you could use this spirit summoning in a Prismari deck as good as you can use it here. I think that's good to note. So there are basically there are even 3 summonings that you can play per college, right? So that's interesting, I think. Maybe makes them even higher picks because more people can actually use them. So, but I'm just showing off the summoning of the college itself in each of the archetypes, but just throwing it out there that you might play off college summonings that share a color with your own college. I think red white is slow enough that environmental sciences is actually useful. I think you have time to cast this card and just gain the 2 life and draw the basic land. I think Lorehold is also an archetype that does not mind to have like 5 or 6 cards on the battlefield. So that makes environmental sciences a playable lesson, I think, in the world, and something that you, well, not very actively, but at least like actively want. Another card that I think is not very good in other colleges, but is kind of good in Lorehold, is the lesson that exiles. Again, I think you have time to cast it. I think you're more of a controlling archetype that can actually. Yeah, that's why I include this here. There's a question from a little more regarding the ideal ratio between lesson cards and cards with learn. So let's start off by saying that I think it's good to have as much lesson cards at least in your sideboard than you have learn cards in your deck, right? I think the fail case of playing a learn card and not having any lesson to get, that's a toughie. Outside
no,
of
you
that,
can rummage.
you can
in
rummage.
case someone doesn't know, you can rummage. That's not nothing. So you can.
It's not nothing, but I think most of the cases you just would like to get a lesson if it's a.
Yeah, no, of course.
And
I'd rather have more lessons than more learn spells.
Right. So I think it's either it's equal or you want more lessons. That's basically what I think is the. And outside of that, I don't think there's like an ideal ratio. I think if you get lost pick lessons, you're picking them up and you're just smiling, right? I don't think it's going to happen, but if it happens, then you're good to go.
Jordan has another question.
Yep.
I can take this one. So I was going to ask later, are there any situations where the power level multiples of cards mean we'd want to main take some lessons? And I don't really think so. I mean, the only situation where I can imagine is that you drew some kind of a busted lesson, maybe the mythic rare one that creates 3 creatures, and you didn't manage to nab any learn spells, and that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Because all of them are just not strong enough on their own to stand as a card. Maybe some of them can work as a sideboard card. Again, if you don't have any kind of ability to learn. If you lost your ability to learn, which means that you're probably my age, then you definitely want to skip lessons altogether and not prioritize them.
Yeah, so I can imagine that you may like I think it's never ideal to mainboard a lesson card, right? I think if you're doing it, it's because a lack of learned cards. It's not because you want to, basically.
I don't think I can think of one that would be useful.
Right. I mean, some of them are like fine. Some of them are like close to a card. Like 3 mana, make 2/1/1 pests. That's close to a card. Like 2 mana,
maybe, yeah.
get a basic of your choice, gain 2 life. Yeah, it could be a card in a ramp deck that you're okay main decking, but outside.
Yeah, but you have alternatives for that. You can play 2 mana 2/1 that puts the land on top of your library instead, and if you need 60.
Right. Okay. So basically, don't main deck lessons until there's something strange, unless there's something strange going on, right? Basically, what we're saying here. So I think Lorehold is the hardest college to get right. As we mentioned earlier, I think a lot of the power is in Quintorius. So not only does Quintorius buff your spirits, and most of your creatures in red-white are spirits. Like I can, it'll be hard to find non-spirit. So this is spirit actually. This is a spirit. This is a human shaman, which is kind of odd. This is spirit. So let's just say that most of them are spirits by themselves. So Lorehold is so the Quintorius will basically be buffing most of your creatures, and then on top of it, it has it's the biggest payoff that you can have for a lot of the stuff that Lorehold is trying to do, which is getting cards out of your graveyard. And Quintorius basically pays you off with a free 3/2 spirit creature token if you do that, which is insane, right? Like that's just very strong. So that's why we said, like, if you have a Quintorius, then drafting Loreholds is definitely not a bad idea. Question is, like, are there other payoffs for getting cards out of your grave? And then the answer becomes a bit more like, so the Stonebound Mentor is sort of a payoff. It allows you to scry one if you get a card out of your graveyard. But in all honesty, like, if that's the payoff, then you probably shouldn't go through all the trouble of getting cards out of your graveyard. So
I think that the Lorehold excavation is a very strong payoff. It's maybe not as strong as Quintorius, but it's hard to kill and pretty reliable in the late game, and it fuels itself. So I think that this one is something to look at from early days, because this one will surely be underdrafted.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's good to add that excavation does not need other things to get stuff out of your graveyard, right? It'll get stuff out of your graveyard itself, basically. So in that sense, I don't think it's a payoff of all. It's not really a payoff of all the other cards getting things out of your graveyard. It's just a thing that gets a card out of your graveyard and makes a spirit for you, which is great. It's a great.
And puts card in your graveyard.
Right. So it's an enabler in itself, right? Yeah.
And golden rule of recent limited: look for cards that are at the same time enablers and payoffs, because this is, Stella was one of them. Zenith Flare was one of them.
Yeah.
Sort of. So, when you look at those cards, they usually tend up to be stronger because you basically don't need to hope on drawing 2 cards. And we know how difficult it is to do 2 particular cards. You just need to draw 1.
Right. So let's say we got the cards that allow us to try and build this finicky, get stuff out of our graveyard deck and get paid off, right? So let's assume we have like a couple of payoffs that make it worth it. So that means we need to get to the end game, right? So I think Lorehold in that sense is quite a slow archetype. It's quite controlly. So that means that we need like cheap defensive creatures and that we need some removal. And I think red and white offer those cards in a lot of varieties. So I think when it comes to removal, there's of course the Heated Debate, which is an insane instant that deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. You won't be the only drafter at the table wanting Heated Debates, but pick up any that you see basically. And I think another one that is very reasonable and will probably be the only one at the table picking these up is Expel. So Expel is 3 mana instant, exile target tapped creature, so it's very similar to the 3 mana white foretell spell that we've seen in the previous set, right? I lost the name, but it dealt 5 to a tapped creature. I think this will
Iron something.
Iron
Verdict.
Verdict, right? So this will fulfill a similar role, and I think since we're the controlly deck, since we're the deck that stays back to block, I think Expel is a very fine addition to your deck, and most likely you'll end up with more than one, because Silver Quill is probably not playing this card. That means that the Lorehold drafters at the table will divide these among each other.
I think in theory you're right. I don't think it's an accident that there's tutorials on the art.
Right.
Unfortunately, in theory, because in practice, people still draft those type of cards even if they shouldn't. And I had this with Iron Verdict exactly. Then when I was, being on the pod where I know that probably I'm the only blue-white drafter, and I should be the only one that is really interested in this Iron Verdict, and I don't see them because people still pick them very highly. They still want to pick them in the aggressive deck because in their brain it is, but what if my opponent turns the corner and starts attacking me? And then, of course, because they draft their deck in such way that they prepare for the opponent to be attacking them, they don't have enough aggression to actually finish the game, and they confirm their bad choice of putting Iron Verdict by losing steam and actually being attacked by the opponent, and they say, see, it was good in my deck.
I was so
my
smart.
opponent managed to stabilize because I didn't have enough aggressors.
Yeah, no, of course. So there are 2 layers of theory here, right? First,
but in theory, you're absolutely right. This card, you don't want it in Silver Quill in most builds of Silver Quill.
Right.
And it looks excellent for Lorehold. I would really want to have as many copies as I want.
Yeah.
That I can.
Definitely. So I think cards that I like to highlight is there's this 0/4 Defender for 1 mana, which actually allows you to put cards in your graveyard. So if we have this engine that wants cards wants to get cards out of our graveyard, I think one of the things we need to do first is get cards in there. And I think this Excavated Wall fulfills 2 roles, right? It's an excellent blocker in the early game, and it also gets cards in our graveyard to get our engine rolling. So this is a card that I would look out for at the start. Another card that I really like is Ageless Guardian. We went over this card already. It's a spirit. It blocks nice. It helps you double block force, and all that jazz. Professor of Symbology is just a great learn card. It's a 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, it learns. Fortunately, it's not a spirit. That would have made the card a lot better. But it's a 2/1 that you can trade off with a body. It a body in the graveyard, and it replaces itself with a lesson. So I think fine card. Sunrise Spirit. Max already talked about this card and how it interacts with archetype. Another one that's nice to highlight is the Illustrious Historian. It's a 2/1, so it's in your deck to trade off, right? You're blocking with this, even if your opponent holds up mana and is like bluffing a trick. You're just throwing your Historian in there because you want it. You want to get it into your graveyard because eventually you want to be able to exile it from your graveyard and create a spirit out of it. So I think it's this is one of those enabler payoff cards all in one that Pawel was talking about earlier, right? Blood Ace General, it buffs all your spirits, like, what is there to say? It's also a 2/2 that trades off nicely with other, like, 2 and 3 drops, so...
Yeah, I was very much on the border with this one, because this ability, I wanted in something much more aggressive than the grinding Lorehold deck. This is the kind of thing that made me have issues with building the skeletons this time. It's just that I see this card as a potential aggressive card because I want to play like 3 spirits early and then start smashing and it pumps the team. But I don't see that deck. It just doesn't exist to me. So in the end, it becomes a card that in my 19th turn, when I have 5 spirits, it makes me kill the opponent 1 turn earlier, which is good bonus. But I mean, it's not something that I probably would try. The biggest benefit of it is being a 2-drop because there are not so many of those.
Right.
And I actually thought this is pretty good, in the sense that you don't have to always keep sending your whole team in every turn. This is like a drawn. If you have 3 of these, you basically have a drawn hammer in some sense. So every turn you send in 1 spirit and make it super big, and they have to trade because they
no trample is essential.
Yeah, they don't have trample. That's the thing. But you still can threaten like trading every turn. But the problem is if you use it on your turn for attacking, now you don't have a blocker. So I don't know. Maybe it's not perfect for that job either.
No. There's an interesting interesting question in chat by Little Mocker who asks, why does this late game deck have 8 2-drops? I think it's a fair question. So first of all, we're trying to stay alive, right? So that's one reason to play 2-drops. Also, a lot of the 2-drops enable the late game indeed, right? So especially the Historian, for example, is a card that you eventually wanna spend 7 mana in total on. So that's a reason. Same goes for the Stonerise Spirit. And yes, we're playing a lot of 2-drops to stay alive. I agree, but we also want stuff in our graveyard, right? So we want to be able to cast spells early and allow them to die. I would say. Tome Shredder is maybe interesting to show here. So it's a 2/2 haster for 3, which is below rate, I would say. It's not a spirit, which is fortunate. It has a nice ability, and it says tap, exile an instant sorcery card from a graveyard, 1/1 counter on Tome Shredder. So I think this is a very reasonable card to leave behind for blocks. Right? You can pump it on blocks, or you could also pump it in the end game of your opponent, make it bigger, and then it has a maybe it allows you to attack like into 4/4s, 5/5s eventually. I'm not sure whether you can use your cards in the graveyard like this freely, but it's a very cheap way to get a guard to leave the graveyard, right? So it's a very cheap enabler that does not cost any mana. Make it 3/2 with trees, and I think those are very important. Like not needing to pay anything to get the spirit, I think is very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I still have doubts about Lorehold as an idea because this looks sort of like it's a deck that Snow tried to be. This kind of late game engine when you start slowly, but then once you get to the late game, you can build this formidable force. And I just don't see the formidable force at the end. I just see more medium cards being played later in the game and maybe getting some, using your graveyard to some extent to put 3/2s, which are being blanket blocked by a 2/4. Or 2/5 if you have the guy that gives +1/+1. But I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I just don't see the same kind of, I don't see Linda to finish the game once you attrition your opponent into nothingness.
I agree, Pawel. So I think this was a very tough one to build because I just can't imagine this winning. I fully agree. That was my conclusion as well. So I think it's good to share that. Pillar Warden is a good card though. I think it's a 4-mana 1/5, which is a formidable blocker. It also has reach. It's a spirit, so that's also a bonus, and it also allows you to get cards from your graveyard eventually. I'm not sure if this is something that you want, like pay 2 on top of the 4 that you already paid for the Warden, tap sack it, get a card out of your graveyard that you then have to actually cast. I'm not sure whether that's something we're going to do. It feels immensely slow, I would say, but at least.
No, I like the 1/5. I like the 1/5. By the way, Jordan says that there is a blue-black in every format. Yes, but if this format has only 5 color combinations, that is really bad for the format.
Right. But yeah, maybe there's a Lorehold deck out there that we just.
No, I'm sure we will figure that out, and it's going to be probably stupid aggro because that's what we always figure out in the end in best of 1. That the stupid aggro is the thing to draft. Don't be cute.
No, that's correct. That's correct. Maybe to wrap this up, like in the top end, there's a Pillar Drop Rescuer, which is a 5-mana 2/2 flyer, and what it does, it turns a target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. So what it does, it also gets a card out of your graveyard. So in that sense, it's an enabler for the engine that you're setting up. But I think also a 2/2 flyer that draws you a 3-drop from your grave is just a fine card. Nothing to write home about.
And again, it's nothing to write home about. But when you think about it, for 3 mana, you should be able to get a 2/2 flyer. So this ability costs you 2 mana. Now, Grave Digger costs additional 2 mana compared to a vanilla 2-drop. So you have a worse ability than on a Grave Digger, which is, again, underwhelming. And you were talking about 5-drop, and 5-drops are way, way harder to cast than 2-drops. And it's a 5-drop that doesn't do much damage blocking unless you're playing another Lorehold player who is everything with toughness 2.
Right.
Like, I mean, I try not to be too bitter, but I mean, we really need this thing has to better deliver with on Quintorius line, because otherwise I just don't see it. Unless and we didn't talk about it, unless we get some bomby rares, obviously.
Right. We're not including those here, but when it comes to the commons, uncommons, it's hard to see this deck like consistently perform, I would say.
So how many lesson spells did you put in your?
You mean learn cards, right?
Learn, yeah.
So there's the professor here that learns.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything else in the tooltip that learns.
Oh wait, no, the removal.
The removal learns, yeah.
6 mana. Yeah.
This one learns.
That's not the one, right? That's not the learn one.
This learns the Rise of the Axis.
That's the big one.
So there's Rise of the Axis and Professor of Symbology, yes, that learns. So it's not.
Okay.
There are not a lot of learn cards that I liked. Archetype, in all honesty.
Yeah, this is again something I have against it, that you will have to put learn spells that don't progress your plan just because you need some learn spells, really.
Right. I think Rise of the Axis is a decent removal spell in a slower deck, but it's very costly. I mean, 6 mana is a lot, and we've seen like 5 mana White Exile spells underperform, right? And this one is even 1 mana.
I mean, obviously I
value
put the 3 damage spell with learn into my archetypes. But you do it at the cost of the cards that are archetypes important. Like, I didn't have space for putting the 6 mana flyer that you have here.
This one is great, right?
It looks pretty good. It's just super slow, but I mean, I guess that the deck is slow.
Yeah, that's the deck, I guess. Oh. Anything else you guys wanna say here?
I wanted to. I guess this is a question about the learn cards. So, for example, something like Spirit Summoning, or you really want to be casting these cards early, like turn 3, turn 4. But to get it, that means you have to cast a learn card like turn 2-ish.
Yes.
And I mean, this is like a big tension in a lot of the archetypes. Like if you have a very reactive learn card like a removal, right, you are not going to cast it very early. That means your lessons are going to be stranded in the sideboard. And I still couldn't quite figure out like what should you do there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I hear people talk about this like this epic 2 mana learn spell into 3 mana lesson, and I think there are like 2 mana learn cards that you actively want to play at common. Like I really like the black one. We'll probably talk about that a bit later. That makes a 1/1 pest and allows you to learn.
Yep.
So then I definitely see this 2-3 curve happening, but I think in most cases lesson cards will be played way later in the game. It's my assumption. But
And that's a good question from Little Mockingbird, by the way. What are the cards that Prismari and Silver Quill are going to fight you over?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the answer is almost none. So that's a good thing.
Professional Typology, that's for sure.
Yeah, so heated.
And no, red all removal, basically.
Yeah, basically the heated debate. This card, of course, is something that Silver Quill will probably play because it's just very on rate. But outside of that, outside of what did I say?
Silver Quill.
Oh yeah, and I meant the Professor is probably going to be played by Silver Quill. Yeah, and the heated debate is probably played by anything that can add a red to their mana base, basically. But outside of that, there's hardly anything here that any other college wants. So maybe that's the power of Lorehold. Like, it's this stash of bad cards that nobody else wants. Like that allows you to get your engine together very consistently. Like
strength in mediocrity.
Right.
the house motto of Lorehold.
Right. It's a bit like Hufflepuff in that sense. Okay.
Are we allowed to mention Harry Potter
Can you
stuff?
click my version of Lorehold just to see if what
sure.
were the difference?
Sure.
Because I mean they are super similar actually.
Did
when
you
I think
add
about
it? Did you add it to the slide deck, or should I? No, I should go to the link, right?
There's on slide deck the link is clickable. Yeah.
Yeah. Which one do you want? The Graveyard Matters or the aggro one?
The Graveyard Matters. Aggro is just very different because it's just cheap creatures. But
Sure.
I wanted to see how my Graveyard Matters one is different from yours.
Tell me about it.
I mean, I had no idea. It was. Oh yeah, so that's the card I put. The Hide the Mark, I think.
Yes.
That's the card
Yes.
that I thought it.
I noticed you had 2 of those. Tell me about this card. How are we going to use this?
Well, this is how your spirit gets to 4 power and don't die. Really, I mean that was the idea. That because you have some spell advantage from learn spells, and I think I put some really rubbish learn spells just to have something to learn.
Let's see.
Like
so you have a guiding voice in here, which
I have one guiding voice, yes.
there's also a study
Study
break.
break. Yep.
Which
Yeah, I think the longer I thought about it, I probably would put 2 study breaks, but I don't know if I was over the limit or something. But this is the card that keeps you alive long because it's just basically like the adventure side of the. What was the flyer from Eldraine?
yeah, the white flyer, the 3 mana flyer that
Yeah.
was insane. Best white combo.
Yeah,
in the set.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's just that instead of getting a 2/3 flyer, you're getting a 3/2 spirit and at the creature side of it. So I guess you learn.
Yeah. Okay. So
Which
you're
is not
basically
good, but
you're using this to stay alive. That's it.
yeah, I think I just put like way more spells than you did.
Yeah, you did.
But I don't know exactly why I did it. I guess it works better with Sun Shredder.
360 asked, said people will fight over Make Your Mark. Can you explain more? Like which archetypes are you thinking about?
Well, I think it's a very aggressive card, right? So Silver Quell
Mm.
might definitely like this one. I think Silver Quell likes combat tricks in general, especially if you
But
play
this
the Magecraft version, right? So I think this is playable in Silver Quill for sure.
But this is not going to save your creature that you invested like a lot of counters on. But maybe if you have a Magecraft trigger that grows a creature, maybe it's fine. I don't know.
I think so. And some of the creatures you're happy to die, right? Because they're giving away their +1/+1 counters.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think there are 2 at common. The
That's
1-drop and the 4-drop that do it. We'll get to those later, but yeah, you might be happy to, like, let's say you have this 0/0 with 4 counters on it. It gets blocked, you make your mark, it trades. You not only get a 3/2, but you also get to replace the counters. I mean,
And you fill the graveyard.
right.
Oh, wait,
You're not Lorehold there.
Yeah.
Do you guys are you guys okay with moving away from this Lorehold archetype?
Oh yeah, no, I think I'm fine, and I will move back to red-white in the next set that comes out.
Right. We can leave our Boros at the side for a set, and then we'll get back to it when it is aggressive again. Thanks for the follow, by the way, Steve. So, well, standout cards in Lorehold, just to wrap this up.
Maybe, not for sure that it's Steve. I think it's maybe Steve.
Maybe. Oh yeah, maybe it's Steve.
Maybe.
Oh, that's good. Thanks for that joke that I didn't get. Okay, so Lorehold, there is this graveyard, cards leaving the graveyard engine. If you want to get that running, I think Quintorius is key in that. There are other payoffs for it, but they are very small, like Stonebound Mentor. I think there are some great enablers to the engine, so I think that's the problem that I have with the engine, is that the enablers are great, but the payoffs are just so rare. Some of the enablers are listed here. I think Pest Caller is one of the best, and Historian and Rescuer are just fine cards. I added Ageless Guardian because I think this is a very important card if you want to stay alive. And it's also a spirit, so it synergizes with all the spirit buffing that is going on. So I think, just to throw it out there, there might be this deck that has this engine and some spirits to stay alive, but as we said, we're unsure.
Maybe worth to mention that there are some really dope rares in Lorehold. So
definitely. So maybe this is just a deck that you get.
Maybe this is the deck that will come when you like get 2 top rares in the early stages, and then from there.